We've all worked with difficult people, and we have worked with people who are petty. We've worked with people who blow us off. We work with people who make work not fun. We work with people who undermine us. We work with people who act like children, all the things. What do you do, Podsters, when that person works for you? What do you do when the team is in peril because this person who is acting out is not being coached, is not being mentored, and is not being told that their behavior is unacceptable because you are afraid to have the conversation, because you don't know how to have the conversation, because you really want everyone to get along. You really want everyone to want to be at work. You really want the project, the team, the organization to be a success, and you are avoiding the conversation. Well, Podsters, today we have a real life, live, happening in real time situation where I share with you a situation with one of my clients where they have someone that reports to them that is undermining their success and torpedoing the whole team. And I share my 3 things to remember to have the difficult conversation. And we talk about specific scripts on how you can address the issue, how you can address it clearly and kindly and with confidence, and how you can make sure that you get to set the tone, you get to set the culture, and you get to set the environment for success for you and the rest of your team. This works if you're a leader. This works if you're on the team. This works if you're in business. This works at home. This works everyone. So Podsters, without further ado, let's do this. Are you ready to speak up, stand out, and get your seat at the table? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast where you'll get real life anecdotes and actionable tools for you to step into your strengths, debunk imposter syndrome, truly know your worth, and show up like you own the room every time. I'm your host, Nancy Medoff, who did the thing and followed my passion for empowering women like you to unleash that inner spark and become who you know you are meant to be. I'm a diehard foodie with a raging Skittles habit who will not stop until women everywhere unmute themselves and truly thrive at work, at home, or wherever you may be. Let's do this. What is up, Podsters? Happy October. We are getting close to my favorite holiday, Thanksgiving. Oh, I love Thanksgiving. Anyway, I digress. So today, Podsters, we are going to talk about a subject that all of us, I believe, have experienced either as the recipient or as the giver-outer of. And what I want to talk about is the perils of people-pleasing in leadership. When you're a leader, when you're a business owner, and even if you're not a leader or a business owner, I want to talk about the perils of people-pleasing at work and at home. And I don't love the term people pleasing. I think it's gotten a bad rap. I think it can make it sound like people pleasers, or if you're people pleasing, it's a sign of weakness. It has gotten a negative connotation. So I tried to come up with another phrase, and there is no synonym for people pleasing because it's not a real word. I mean, it's not, a Webster dictionary word. So the way I like to think about it is being overly agreeable. And I think that makes it, for me personally, that makes it a little bit easier to talk about without getting the ick. When I hear people pleasing, I'm like, I just don't even like that expression. So we're talking about being overly agreeable at work. And we're going to focus on at work. Obviously, it applies to home. The reason why I want to talk about this today, this is happening in real time, Podsters. I am coaching someone who works with someone who's very difficult. This person that she works with, he does not have any emotional intelligence. He is petty. He is frenetic. He is a leader of others, and he reports to her. His team can't stand him. And he is narcissistic, it's a bad situation. And my client is this man's boss. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. My client is this person's boss. So what do you do when you have this difficult person and they keep pushing your limits when you are responsible for their performance and when you're responsible for them doing their job and when you're responsible for the happiness of everyone else that works with this person? That's a very difficult position to be in. And I can relate because throughout my years in leadership and rising through the ranks, I would lead people who I used to be a colleague with. So someone I would work side by side with. Now I was their boss. I would lead people, and sometimes the majority of the time it would go great, but sometimes you just have someone and they're a difficult person and it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it's demoralizing a little bit, and it's a pain, and it's not pleasant. And it's also your job, especially if you're the leader. If you are a leader of others and you are not addressing the behaviors, and I'm going to give you this real life example in a minute. If you're a leader of others, you are doing the person a disservice by not calling out clearly and kindly their behaviors and what you believe would be a better approach. You are doing them a disservice if you don't showcase to them the issues and give them this feedback. You're also doing the rest of the team a disservice, and you are by far, big time, doing yourself a disservice. And doing so, having the difficult conversation or having the conversation, having the uncomfortable conversation, laying out, okay, this is the behavior that I'm noticing, and this is the effect of the behavior, and I'd like you to consider that. And the next time this situation happens, let's talk about what you might be able to do differently. You can do this clearly and kindly. It doesn't make you mean. It doesn't make you a bad person. Your job is to mentor this person and work with this person. And if you're not doing that and you're avoiding that, which we have all done, I have done it many times. Nobody likes to do this. And at the same time, it's your job. It's your job to address it. So let's get back to my client and her situation. Okay, so she's been dealing with this person probably for, I don't know, let's say 6 months to a year. She's very frustrated. She's very fed up. She's not making much progress. And I would suggest she's not making much progress because she's frustrated, she's fed up, and she doesn't want to deal with it. And she keeps saying to me, she said something that really hit a chord with me and led me to kind of think about this more and thus create this podcast. She said to me the other day, I'm trying so hard to be respectful. And what I'm witnessing is she's not trying hard to be respectful. She's avoiding the situation. She's not addressing it. She's not mentoring this person. She's not coaching this person. She's making an uncomfortable environment for everybody else on the team. She's allowing him to maybe manipulate her a little bit. And she is giving away all of her power. And I believe that she wants to be respectful. Absolutely. That's not why she's not having these conversations. She's not having the conversations because she's not comfortable having them. She doesn't want to have them. She does not like conflict. She'll address conflict, but she doesn't want to have the conversation because it's going to be a big hassle. I've been there many, many, many years ago. I had someone on my team. This was a long, long, long time ago, who he was just very, very rude, very dismissive. And I didn't want to deal with it at all. I really didn't. I just rather, whatever. It doesn't matter to me, so I don't want to deal with it. Right? Doesn't matter to me, so I don't want to deal with it. Well, I can't do that. I'm responsible for other people. I'm responsible for other people's environment. I'm responsible for creating an environment where people want to come to work. And my lack of addressing the issue is impacting them wanting to come to work. And that's on me, not him, me. Because he was acting how he was acting. It's my job to fix it. Anyway, so I said to her today, or I said to her when I was talking with her, advocating for yourself, creating reasonable expectations and communicating those expectations ahead of time, that is not disrespectful. Creating boundaries is not disrespectful. Um, Having standards of how people are treated, having standards of how people are spoken to, having standards of behavior in the workplace, that is not disrespectful. That's leadership. That's being a boss. That's being the one in charge. And by not addressing it and by, maybe pseudo addressing it a little bit, but not really having the heart of the conversation, the behavior continues and it continues to be an uncomfortable environment for other people on her team. And he continues to undermine her at every possibility. And it's at the point where the inaction is hurting her credibility. And I have, she has told me a few situations where other people are starting to notice and other people are like, well, why aren't you addressing this? And I believe it goes back to this people pleasing or being overly, what was the word I used? Overly agreeable. So another byproduct of her wanting to keep the peace or have everybody happy is, and not addressing it, it's impeding progress with the team. They can't get things done because this person is so difficult. It's holding her back from knowing what she needs to do to lead the team because this person's throwing up roadblocks every chance he gets. She can't lead the team. The team can't really get things done the way that she wants to get them done. It's causing delays, drama. And as I mentioned, she's losing credibility. And I believe that he's playing off the fact that she is wired this way. And he knows this. So let's think about being wired this way. Women are socialized different than men. They are. We have been for years. And while it's gotten a little different or a little better, women are still taught to keep the peace, to be a team player, to, don't let it get you upset. Oh, they didn't mean anything by it. And this hardwired, I'm going to keep the peace and I'm going to make sure everybody's okay. And, some of it depends on where you are in the birth order. Some of it may not. I recorded an episode a couple of weeks ago where I said I was people pleasing. I didn't even realize it. I was being overly agreeable. I didn't even realize it. This was at home. So back to my client. So she's wired this way and he's taking advantage of that. And I can see it. And I'm sure the people on her team can see it. And he for sure can see it. So what can she do? What can you do? And this is, this applies to if you're leading someone else or even if you're on a team with someone else and you have to have this uncomfortable conversation about this way this person's behaving. So there's three things that I'm asking her to focus on. So number one is to stay true to who you are. You know who you are. You know how you behave. You know how you want to work. You know what you want to say. You know how you want to be. And if you're dealing with a team member who is acting in a manner that is not congruent with how this team operates, a culture, a workplace norm, whatever you want to call it, you have to address it, and you can address it while being true to yourself. Remember who you are. And it's hard to not stoop to their level. And here's what I mean by that. So what I mean is when someone is behaving badly, many times, and I've done this myself, many times their behavior prompts you to behave badly. You mirror their behavior. Let me give you an example. Let's say somebody's has an outburst at a meeting. If it's in the moment, you might say, hold on, and you might address it right there in the meeting. It takes an incredible amount of patience, self-control, anticipating that this is going to happen, whatever the case may be. Nitpicking, like it doesn't matter what the behavior is. Let's take something innocuous. Okay. Let's say sending late night emails. Okay. That's pretty harmless in the grand scheme of things. And so let's say you're on a team and you lead the team and your team members are circulating after hours emails like 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And you don't. That's not how you work. I would hope that's not how you work because we get to choose how we work. So if your team's sending around all these emails and you feel like you have to jump in, well, that's not how you work. That's not the behavior. That's not the expectation. That's not the culture you want to create. So don't mirror that behavior. And if it's somebody acting childish, don't stoop to their level. I've said to this person, who's the parent, who's the child here? And that's an extreme, that's an extreme analogy. It's also the best way I could drive it home. Who's the parent, who's the child? Why? Whoa, time out. You're in charge. You are in charge. This is your team. This is your situation. You get to decide how you behave. So that's remember who you are and step into who you are. Oftentimes when we're uncertain, particularly in a leadership role, I've talked about the spotlight of leadership on this podcast quite a bit. We will act how we think we should act, or we'll act, which is good, right? I mean, if you're growing and you're developing, you want to act how you think you should act. In this case, it's not authentic. It's not authentic. So remember who you are. Simba. I had to throw that in there. Okay. If you watch The Lion King, you know what I'm talking about. So remember who you are. All right. Remember who you are. Number 2, this is business. This is not personal. This is business. Of course, you want your team to be happy. Of course, you want everyone to get along. You want people to feel valued. I want everybody on my team to feel valued. Even the people who are giving me a hard time. I want people to want to come to work. Of course, you want cohesion and collaboration. Yes. But what's the cost? And where does wanting everyone to get along excuse bad behavior? Where does wanting everyone to get along come at the expense of progress, of moving forward, of having difficult conversations, having the constructive feedback? Seeing that somebody's not in the right role. Think about the rest of the team. When they see you time and time, again, time after time, letting this person behave in a manner that's not okay, and you're not addressing it because you want to make sure you're respectful, or because your inclination is to be overly agreeable. Many of you who listen to this podcast, this is a no-brainer for you. You're senior leaders. You've been doing this a long time. I would suggest that it's still not comfortable. It's still, we still have to remind ourselves, this is our job. And we have to remind ourselves that the situation has nothing to do with you. This has nothing to do with you. And I want you to really hear me on this one, Podsters, because this is a lesson that is really, really valuable. You are not responsible for someone else's behavior. You are not. You are only responsible for your own behavior. So if somebody's throwing the shenanigans at you, and if somebody's acting like a child, or if somebody's being manipulative or creating a toxic work environment, whatever the case is, that is on them. It is not on you. You are only responsible for your behavior. So here's number 3. And after number 3, I'm going to give some real life scripts, and I'm going to do them off the cuff, because I think when I do things off the cuff, it's a lot more authentic. And I think that's going to be more valuable to you. So the last thing, the number 3, is to understand you have to address the issue. It's your job. You're doing a service to yourself, that person, and the rest of the team if you don't. We all want people to like us. That is the truth. We all want people to like us. And the other truth there is that not everyone will like you. It's a fact of life. And you cannot please everyone all the time. You cannot make everybody happy. You can't. And in this case, when you're dealing with somebody who is making your life difficult and making your job difficult and making everyone else on the team's job difficult, you have to address the situation. You have to. And you have to have the difficult conversation, and the entire conversation, not just like some of it. Let's say you have 5 things that you want to address in the conversation and you get to 3. You might finish the conversation and say, well, I got 3 out of 5. That was a successful conversation. And in fact, I did a podcast episode about this. It's called The Last 10%. And I brought in Bill Benjamin, who is an emotional intelligence expert. I'm going to link to that podcast in the show notes. And we talk about people will have difficult conversations up to a certain point, and it's that last 10%, that critical last piece where many of us, I do it all the time, where many of us say, well, I got the most out of it. It's okay. I made progress. I'm not going to continue that conversation. And it's that last 10% where you really have the breakthroughs. So the whole conversation. And if you need to bring in notes you should have specifics. There's no question. If you're going to coach someone on their behavior, you have to have specifics. And even when you have the conversation, and if you have the whole 100% of the conversation, understand that the situation could very well get worse before it gets better. This is simply human behavior. And ideally, the outcome you want is that you coach this person and you mentor this person and you're very specific about, here was the situation, here's what you did, here's the effect it had, and here's what I'd like to see differently in the future. You can do all this and they still won't respond and they will still be a problem. And understand that it could become worse before it gets better. That simply is. That's a fact of life. That's a fact of leadership. And when you think about all the reasons, let's think about all the reasons why someone might be giving you a hard time at work that is on your team. One could be they don't like you. Okay. That has very little to do with you. They don't like you. It could be they resent the fact that you got promoted over someone else. Okay. They resent the fact that you got promoted over someone else. Has nothing to do with you. It could be they're raised in a culture where they don't respond well to women in leadership. That's happened to me several times. That has nothing to do with it. I can't change the fact that I'm a woman. I could, but that's a whole other conversation. They could be resistant to change. They could be in the wrong job. They could be having really difficult situations at home. Notice what's going on here. They. And you are responsible for creating the environment where you can talk to them. You can give them clear expectations. You can hold them accountable to those expectations and then address it as you move forward. So let's look at some scripts for this. And it's not, if you've read the book, if you've read Unmute Yourself, the book, or even listen to some past podcasts about how to overcome conversation gender bias, this is when someone's speaking over you. It's very situational. And one of the things I recommend in the book is that if somebody's speaking over you in a meeting, that you pull them aside after the meeting and say, I'm not sure if you intended this. Or you could even say, I know you probably didn't mean this, but when I was talking about, the widget project, you jumped in and you took over the conversation and it impacted my ability to communicate my message. I'm sure you didn't mean that. I want to let you know that that's what happened. So that's one way to approach it. That's overcoming conversation gender bias. Similarly, you could start the conversation with the person whose behavior is undesirable and say, I'm sure you don't mean this. And at the same time, I need to call to your attention that this is the behavior. I'm sure you didn't mean this. I noticed that when I'm presenting an idea to the team, your body language, oftentimes you have your arms folded and you're shaking your head and you're also interrupting me. So that's one way to address it. I would not, in a leadership role, start with, I'm sure you didn't mean this, because they probably do mean it. If that's the behavior, they probably do mean it. So you can start. So let's say you have someone that works on your team, and let me think of a scenario here. Let me think of a good one. Oh, here's an easy one. Let's say you have someone on your team and they work with you and they report up to you, and you gave them a project and they blew off the project. They blew off the deliverable. You never heard from them again, right? Okay, great. So you could start with, hey, I'm checking in with you to see what the status of the project is. Oh, I haven't gotten to it yet, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to give this person a name. I am going to name him Mike. Poor Mike. I always use that name. You could say, Mike, I don't know where the breakdown in communication is. When we spoke 2 weeks ago and we agreed that the project would be completed and on my desk by this past Monday, and then I checked with you on Monday and it wasn't completed yet, and I gave you till Tuesday, and on Tuesday it still wasn't completed. I'm not sure I understand where the holdup is. Can you help me understand what the holdup is? Right? Mike says, well, there really wasn't a holdup. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Okay. So we agreed back on, whatever the date was, that this would be the date. When you don't meet these deadlines, It slows down the work of the rest of the team. It impacts my ability and your ability for the team to move forward. And frankly, Mike, it's disrespectful. And I need to make sure that you understand that when we agree on a deliverable date, my expectation is that you're going to be able to meet that deliverable on that date. And if for any reason you can't, that you bring it to my attention, and I am happy to help you work through how we can make sure that you meet that date. I want to make sure you understand this. Is this something that you understand? The end. So I thought that sounded pretty respectful. It was stern in the end, and it was also respectful. I need to make sure you understand that when we say that the project's going to be done on Friday, that my expectations that the project will be done on Friday. One thing I left out, Podsters. Moving forward, if you aren't able to meet the deadline, I expect you to let me know ahead of time. If you don't let me know ahead of time, I'll assume that things are going smoothly, and I will assume that the deadline will be met. And if you can't meet the deadline and we don't talk about it, that's going to be a performance issue, and it will be addressed as a performance issue. Okay, right? It's not about me. It's about Mike. Mike's the one that's not meeting the deadlines. I want to do one more. And it could be so many different, it could be a number of different things. And I'm going to take a simple one. So let's say I'm going to use Mike again. You work in an office and Mike continues to come in late. Mike comes in like, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes late every day, right? And there's an expectation as to when the office is open and working. Oh, let's talk about sales. So when I was in sales, we used to have what's called prime selling time. And what prime selling time means from 9 a.m. till like 4 p.m., that's prime selling time. That is when your clients are at their desk. That is when you can be talking to your stakeholders. This is when you're moving forward with contracts. Like 7 a.m., not prime selling time. That's prep work time. That could be catch up time. But from 9 to 4-ish, whatever is in your industry, that's your sales activity. That's when you are selling. So let's say this person comes in late, person comes in at, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and the expectation is they're in at 9. So this could be something as simple as, hey, Mike, I want to talk about your work hours. I've noticed that on 3 occasions in the past 30 days, you have showed up at 9:30 and we start work here at 9. So I want to make sure, first of all, that everything's okay in your personal life and that you're able to be here by 9. Right. Mike says, yeah, I can be here by 9. Whatever, there's traffic or I stopped to get my Dunkin' Donuts or whatever the case may be. My Boston is coming out. So you say, okay, Mike, well now, okay. So I understand that sometimes you have traffic, as do I. My expectation is that you'll account for these unforeseen circumstances and that you'll factor in the time for traffic and getting your coffee or whatever the case may be, and that you will show up at 9 like everyone else on the team does. And if you are not able to show up at 9, we have a conversation about it and we can talk about the potential to adjust your work hours or move you to a position where you don't need to be here at 9 o'clock. I want to make sure that you're clear that the expectation is you're here at 9. And if you can't be here at 9, or if you aren't here at 9, that's going to be a performance issue and we'll be having a different conversation. Direct, yes. Stern, a little bit. Probably because I've had to do it so much. Is Mike clear on the expectation? Yes, he is. He is there. He needs to be there at 9. And if he is not there at 9, that is considered a performance issue and the conversation will be different. So I know I treat it like it's really simple, Podsters. And the reason why I treat it like it's really simple is because if you can take a step back and look at what your role is and what your job is and what you're responsible for, and take the emotion out of it and not take it personally, it is pretty simple. There is a person who is not meeting performance standards. There is a person who is not behaving in an acceptable manner in the workplace. And you have to work with this person to correct the behavior. And beating around the bush and letting it go on for months and months and months, that's not helping anyone. So 3 things. 1, remember who you are, be authentic. 2, don't take it personally. This is not personal. This is business. And 3, remember that this is not optional, that you must address the issue. So Podsters, it's kind of a downer today. We have a lot coming up. We're coming into November, as I mentioned earlier. I'm going to talk about boundaries again. We're going to talk about burnout and how to avoid burnout. I've wanted to have this guest for a while on the podcast, and I've kind of pushed it off until this time of year because it's around Thanksgiving and the holidays where we find our boundaries are pushed. So we want to make sure that you feel comfortable and you have some scripts to hold your boundaries. It's one of my favorite conversations. We have, Podsters. I didn't even tell you about this. We are going to have an episode about imposter feeling. I might have already recorded this. The punchline here is the situation where I felt like an imposter has played out, and I was not an imposter. And my guest that I wanted to come on the podcast is actually coming on the podcast. More on that later, Podsters. I know that was cryptic, but I can't remember if I recorded this or not. I don't think I did. So we're going to talk about imposter feeling a little bit more. I am going to do a session on answering your questions, Q&A, ask me anything. Next week, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we can do that. If you can't, if you want to take a screenshot of this podcast and ask a question, I'm going to go live. Not live. I'm going to post in my stories. Ask me anything. It's going to be for the podcast on Instagram. It's Nancy_Medoff. I am going to set up a question in Spotify. If you listen on Spotify, where you can ask the question, and we are going to figure out how you can leave a voice message to ask the question. And I'm going to answer all the questions. I love those episodes when podcast hosts do that. So I'm going to do it, Podsters. So if you have a question, shoot me an email. Hit me up through my website, nancymedoff.com. Hit me up on Instagram, Nancy_Medoff. I am on LinkedIn, Nancy Medoff. I am on Facebook. You really can't swing a cat without hitting me somewhere on social media. So until then, Podsters, peace out, and I'll see you next week. That's a wrap, Podsters. And before we go, I ask you, what's one thing from today's episode that you will use this week to unmute yourself? DM me, email me, send a smoke signal, whatever you need to do. Let me know what you're going to do differently. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and leave a 5-star review on Apple. This helps me spread our message of empowerment to more people worldwide. Let's do this.